Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing another episode of my how-to series, and this one is going to be on how to obtain a matte finish foundation for around 6 to 7 hours of some good oil-free makeup on the face. So I've been testing out a few different products that I already own that I'm obsessed with. Kind of trying to find the right concoction for like my perfect like oil-free matte foundation finish, and I think I've come up with something that works for me. So let's just go ahead and get right into this video. The first product I'm going to go ahead and start off with is my Your Good Skin Anti-Shine Base Lotion. This can be used as a primer or can just be used as a moisturizer. Because I am working with a more matte finish today, I want to use products that are more mattifying. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take it in the back of my hands and I'm going to begin applying it in all the areas where I need to have a more matte finish. So my forehead, my nose, right here, these smile lines. The reason I'm leaving the cheeks blank is because my cheeks, because of the rosacea, they tend to get very dry during this time of the year. So my first tip would be to make sure that you target the areas where you get very, very oily. So if you get really, really oily on your T-zone, then you want to target those areas. If you get really oily in your cheeks, then you want to target those areas. If you get really oily all over the face, which is what used to happen to me until my rosacea got a little bit more intense, then I would just use the anti-shine base everywhere. If I use this everywhere else that doesn't require a more matte finish, it can definitely make the foundation flake off. So now we're gonna be going back in with our Ultra Repair Cream. This one isn't the face moisturizer, it's just the moisturizer, so you can honestly use this on your hands, on your body. It's just like a multi-use product. And what I'm gonna do is warm it up in my hands, and I'm going to begin pressing it on my cheeks because I want that hydration there, but I don't want to disturb too much of what we did everywhere else. Also, I would say pay attention to your moisturizers. If you do have oily skin, you want to use something that's oil-free. You want to use something that's not going to give you a greasy feel or greasy look appearance on top. So always pay attention to all those things. I know when we want a matte foundation, a matte finish, we automatically think, oh, all our makeup products have to be matte, but you also have to put into consideration that your skincare products should be oil-free, should be great for oily skin, so that you're really attacking it from skincare and beyond. So for primer, I'm going to be using the L'Oreal Infallible Matte Lock. I am obsessed with this primer. It is drugstore, and it's funny because I picked this up by mistake. I wasn't even meaning to pick this up, but I immediately fell in love with it. So I'm gonna apply it, like I mentioned, T-zone area. You really want to conquer those areas where you really produce the oil quickly through the day. Also keeping in mind that you do not use too much product, because if you use too much product, then it can also flake off because you're kind of adding too many layers. The thing with doing a more matte finish is that you really want to keep in mind the fact that you want to make sure that by adding all these layers of kind of like the buildup for the matte finish, you really have to use your fingers to your advantage by really patting things in, using a gentle touch, not using too much product, because using too much product can end up giving you an overly matte look or giving you a cake finish. And in the other areas, I'm going to be using the Pores Be Gone Matte Primer by First Aid Beauty. This one doesn't keep me extremely matte. I don't really rely on this one for that. I more so use this when I'm having like flare-ups or when I kind of want a matte consistency on the outer edges, but still give my skin some hydration. So I know that this one will work well with the areas where I went in with the Ultra Repair Cream and not the Your Good Skin Anti-Shine Base, because it has a consistency where it absorbs the oils, but in a way where it's not like it just absorbs it enough for it to kind of remove any type of shine that may be a little too intense. Another thing I learned is that with primers, you can use all your primers. I know sometimes people think, oh, I'm gonna get a primer and it's gonna cover my full face. A lot of primers tend to be designated for certain situations, whether it's to hydrate or to give you a matte finish or to give you a poreless finish. So that's why I say, like, with primers, you can definitely mix them and use a bunch of them at once. So now we can move on to foundation. So for foundation, we're going to be using 2 of them. My favorite mattifying foundation that I just feel like gives me a beautiful, perfected finish is the Makeup Revolution Conceal and Define. Now, if you do not like a super full coverage foundation, you don't like a really matte foundation, you're not gonna like this. This is for somebody that likes a really nice full coverage finish. I don't use this all the time. I use this more so when I really wanna look snatched, but I do feel like the days where I find myself wanting to do a more mattifying finish, and I want my skin to look really nice and matte, I like to stick to this type of foundation. Now, in the areas where I have more so of a dry skin or like flakiness go on, which would be my cheeks, I like to use the face tape mixed with a little bit of the Makeup Revolution, just so that we can kind of have the similar consistency going all throughout. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna first start off with the Makeup Revolution. This is in the shade F12, and I'm gonna go ahead and kind of take it like you guys saw in T-zone. I'm gonna be taking my Morphe sponge and I'm going to just be putting the product into my skin. I like to use a sponge when I'm doing a matte finish, just because I feel like matte consistencies tend to be a little bit heavier in consistency. So you really want to make sure that you use something that can allow it to kind of absorb any of the extra foundation that just may be sitting there. And I feel like this does that. So that's why I'm using that. And you can see I'm just covering this part because this part is a little dry. So we want to leave that alone. I never realized how hard it is to have dry skin and how you really, like, it's hard to find foundations that work because everything can be flaky until my rosacea started to get dry. Like, these areas can get really dry, especially during the summer, like sandpapers. So I was like, wow, I can't even imagine having dry skin everywhere. Like, it just sounds like a nightmare. Even though, like, I struggle with oils, I kind of rather have oily skin because I know I can just blot it than have dry skin and have to like look for the perfect foundation. Okay, so I'm gonna be taking a little bit more on the nose. This is another reason why I love this foundation, is because it has this doe foot applicator. So I feel like I'm really able to target where I wanna place the foundation. And it's just like a dream come true. So I would recommend, if you're doing all over matte finish, you want it to last a good long day, using a sponge will be your best bet, because if it is a little bit more of a full coverage, thicker, slightly thicker, because I feel like this foundation isn't that thick, but if you are scared that it may be too full coverage or too matte of a foundation, the sponge can always come to the rescue when it's damp to really absorb any of that extra-ness that may be there. Also, kind of give it a little bit of hydration always helps. Or what you can do is use a hydrating spray, like the Morphe Continuous Spray, to really kind of add a little bit of something so that it's not like straight up matte, in case you're worried that it may be. But I feel like this foundation gives me like a nice oil-free finish without it giving me like, whoa, too intense of a matte. So now I'm gonna move over with the face tape. And with this one, because I am using this, and I'm also gonna be mixing a little bit of my Makeup Revolution in there, I'm gonna take my sponge and just kind of mix them together. I mainly did more of the face tape than the Makeup Revolution for the cheeks, but I pretty much have the same situation going on. And I'm still using a damp sponge for the cheeks because the cheeks are a little tiny bit dry. Another thing with doing a more matte full coverage finish is making sure that even though you're going for a matte look, you don't want it to look cakey. So you really want to be just going in with the right tools to give you the right finish, so that you're not worrying about it later on. And you don't have to worry too much about the under eye, because with the under eye, we're gonna go back in and do concealer. But you can see. And the reason I'm going straight in with the sponge and not dotting it first is because I want the pigmentation to be as full as it can be, because you guys know the cheek area is where it's the most red. So I want it to cover faster, as opposed to me having to build up too much product onto that area. And you can see it looks very nice and oil-free, but it doesn't look cakey. Now with the leftover, we're gonna go back in those areas where I get a little bit overly oily, like right here. And I'm just really gonna make sure that I target that. Same thing on this side. You also want to make sure that you use the same amount of product on each side. Oh, I love these foundations together. They're like the dream team. We're gonna put the foundations to the side, but these are fantastic. And now we're gonna move on to our concealer. Okay, so for concealer, I'm gonna be using the Jouer concealer. I've been using this ever since I got it in my order, and I am obsessed with it. It is such a good concealer. It is very full coverage. It's slightly tacky, but once it's locked into place, it's not going anywhere, and I feel like it does a good job of keeping those under eyes just perfectly intact. So I just really been enjoying it. So I'm opening, this is in the shade Creme Brûlée. You do not need a lot of this. So I know I've mentioned several times that if you're using a really matte foundation, to try to use a more hydrating concealer. But here's the thing, as on the cheeks we mixed a little bit of a hydrating foundation with a matte foundation, you can still get away with using a matte formula. To an extent, it's actually good that we mixed our matte foundation with our hydrating foundation on the cheeks, because this is where we are putting our concealer on, and we still kind of want the concealer to kind of stay with that same matte consistency. This consistency of concealer is full coverage for sure. It doesn't budge. Like I mentioned, it's a little tacky, so once it's on there, and you don't have to worry about it moving. And you can see the difference. It's great. It's so good. And now I want to go ahead and take powder. So I'm going to be using my Airspun Powder, and I'm going to be using my Morphe sponge. This is my powder sponge, and we're going to bake the under eye. And I'm using the Airspun Powder for my under eyes because I want to make sure that the under eye stays bright. So we're going to be going in again. And like I mentioned, you do not need that much product. We're just kind of doing like some subtle dots here. Targeting. And it works great with the foundations. There's no breakage or anything or separation. So that just goes to show that we did a good job of prepping the skin so that everything still stays intact and doesn't budge. You really want to make sure that you pay very close attention to how you prep your skin, because how you prep it will determine how everything else will fall on top of the foundation. And while that's baking, we're gonna go ahead and start off with everything else that's gonna lay on the skin. And I want to talk about bronzer. So we're gonna be using the Fenty Beauty bronzer in Beige Gal. And we're opening it, and I'm gonna begin bronzing my face. And big recommendation, if you want a matte finish, stick to all powder products. Do not use cream contours. Just keep it all very, very powdery. Because if you start to mix creams, I'm telling you, by the third, fourth hour of you being out and about, conquering your day, it's going to look like it's moving around, it's budging. Really want to give my face a nice bronzy finish. We can start to build up a little bit of bronzer right in this area. Just a little bit, because we're gonna go in with blush. Because this is more so of a high coverage, kind of matte finish concealer, you don't want to leave on the bake for too long. You can kind of start to feel when it kind of feels a little bit tight, and that's when you can go in and brush it off. But I say that while you're doing that, you want to go ahead and powder your face, because then we're going to go in and bake everything with our powders. So I'm going to be dusting this away, and as you're dusting, you start to kind of drag it into the areas where you get oily. So we kind of go down here and really take care of the powder and just slowly, very softly dust it outwards, because you're not letting that powder go to waste, especially not when you have oily skin. You want to use it to your advantage. I'm going to be taking my blush. I'm going to be using Crush by Kylie Cosmetics. This is part of the Valentine's Day collection, so you can't find this. I like this because it's a very light pink blush, so I feel like it complements the skin nicely. And we're just going kind of in circular motions. And you don't need to use too much of it, because like you don't want it to start to separate in those areas. Okay, so now that we went ahead and did that step, we're gonna begin powdering our face a little bit. I'm not gonna go too in depth on this part, because I want to do a video dedicated strictly on how I like to bake my face. So I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but I'm gonna show you where I go next. So once we went ahead and baked our under eyes, I don't bake my cheek area, obviously, because of the fact that it is a little bit dry. So the only area that I bake around the cheek area is down here, because of the fact that we have that blush and bronzer, and we kind of want to give it a little bit of a structured form, but we kind of want to kind of leave that. Then we're going to go in and take our brush and we're going to powder a little bit on the T-zone. Now I want to tell you guys, the reason I'm not using, because typically when I'm just baking, I like to use the powder puff, because I'm able to just slap it on there. But because we already did our eye makeup, I've noticed that the times where I've done it and I already have my eye makeup on, it tends to get on my lashes and on my black liner. My black liner right now is so black and precise and perfect that if there is powder that lands on there, it's just going to defeat the purpose of it even looking so beautiful right now. So that's why I'm just going to be using a little bit of my brush to kind of set those areas. And I'm being very, very careful not using too much powder. But you guys will see really how I bake when I do that video. But you just want to be gentle so that it doesn't get on the eyes or the lashes, because there's no going back. I got some on the nose, but that's okay, because we're about to do a little bit of nose contour. So we're gonna leave this bake on for a little bit. We do wanna go in and bake one more area that I get really oily, and that's right here. Keeping it away from the areas where I tend to get a little bit more dry. These techniques really make a difference on keeping your makeup matte. I never realized how much baking helped me until I started to really take it seriously, but also using the right foundation and primer and stuff, because you can bake and use like a really awful foundation that's matte, but it's just like way too thick and cakey, way too thick and full, and it can give you really cakey vibes. So you really want to make sure you're using the right product. So while this is kind of baking, we're gonna go ahead and do a little bit of nose contour. We're gonna go back into Beijing Gal by Fenty Beauty. I hate, these things are just so hard to open. There's been so many times that I literally stab my fingernail into the pan. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of nose. Okay, so we're gonna be using a little bit of nose contour. Typically I like to do it with cream contour, but because we are doing a matte finish, we need to use powder. We're just going up and down and create a very subtle, soft bronzy finish. Now we're gonna dust off the bake here. And also here, dust that off while we wait. So I like the Airspun for baking my eyes or like any quick areas bake, but whenever I bake this part, I feel like it gives me a little bit of a harder time to really rub it off. So that's why I really liked the way that the Jeffree Star one comes off quickly when you are baking. That's the one thing that I felt was different in consistency than everything else that I have. Quickly finish off the nose just a little bit more. I kind of want to make it a little bit more snatched. Then we're gonna go back in with our Morphe sponge. And my camera's about to die. I need to go get a new battery pack. Now we're gonna be taking a more precise brush. This is the Morphe JH10 brush. We're gonna be baking the nose just a little bit more intensely. Okay, so I quickly wanna talk about this like random experience I had. So the other day I went into Sephora to purchase the new Huda Beauty setting spray because I heard it's like this really good matte setting spray. And thank God I did this, but I went over to the Huda Beauty section and I just decided to try it out for myself. After about 30 minutes, once I had purchased the setting spray, I started to feel really irritated. My skin started to itch. It has the same smell as the Huda Beauty foundation, the Faux Filter foundation, and pretty much all their Huda Beauty products, which is kind of like a fragrancy, like rose scent. And honestly, like I don't mind it whatsoever, but I think that's what made my skin irritate so bad. It was the fragrance in that product. So I went back to the store and I returned it because I was like, I cannot, like there's no way I'm gonna be using this. So I quickly returned it and I was so happy that I did that. Okay, so while I let this nose bake for a minute, I'm gonna go ahead and do very, very subtle highlights. So I always like to have a little bit of a glow because I feel like when I go to a really matte state, I want just a little tiny bit of a shimmer. So I'm going to be using the MAC Oh Darling, one of my favorite highlighters. And I'm gonna be using my Anastasia Beverly Hills brush. This is the A24, 22, I can't remember. I'm literally just gonna be dipping it very, very softly. Like literally dusting it like this, very lightly so that it doesn't really give me an intense, like do you see how that looks? Just light. Because I feel like my other brush that I like to use, which is, where is it? I like to use this brush right here. And it's so precise that it gives me such an intense highlight and it looks so beautiful because of the precision. So I like to use something like this when I want something a little bit more diffused out because it's fluffy. So it's able to really distribute it but still give me a very subtle glow. Do you see how it's so subtle? And that's exactly what I'm looking for. So if you are leaning to go for a more matte finish, I would say keep your glow subtle as well because I find that for me, when I tend to do a very, very intense highlight, for some reason I feel like highlight can make my skin through the hours look very, very like dewy and oily. So I find that when I keep it very simple like this, it tends to just give me a glow from within almost. And even though it's not like a pop-in highlight or the highlights that are in right now, it's still just a very pretty, soft, natural glow. So now we're gonna go in with a setting spray. It's not really my setting spray that I'm gonna use for the grand finale, but in replacement of the technique that I did last time where I went in with a continuous spray and set it once and then went in with it one more layer, I'm gonna go in with the MAC Fix Plus in the Fix Plus matte version. So with this one, you really, really want to shake it well because it is a more like, it looks like milk, like white consistency. You want to make sure you don't get any of that residue on your face. So we're just mixing this well. We're doing a test spray, which is what I always like to do. We're kind of keeping it far. And there it gives you a more locked into place finish. But this is definitely one that I recommend. You just really have to make sure that you shake, 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 and that you kind of keep it at a further distance than you would with your other setting sprays where you're kind of closer. You want to keep it further because if you're too close, it's going to leave those little white marks on your face. So I'm going to finish off really quick the rest of my makeup, which is not too much, and then I'm going to come back so we can do our little final steps and we can have a very mattifying day. Okay, so I am back. I finished my entire face of makeup. I basically just did a lip, and then I did a little bit of smoking the lower lash line. For lip, I'm wearing Stripped Down MAC lip liner, and then I'm wearing ColourPop I Love Sarai collab lipstick in Sueño de Coco. It's been my favorite. So now we're just gonna go in with our setting spray, and today we're gonna be using a different setting spray than our typical Seriously Fab Zinc It Over. We're gonna go ahead and take our Urban Decay All Nighter setting spray, and this is the setting spray that I like to use when I want everything to be locked in, oil-free all day long, and really, really stay in place. And now we're good. We are locked in, not going anywhere, remaining oil-free matte for the whole day. So this routine is typically what I like to use when I want a 6 to 7 hour wear of true matte. I was about to say matteness again, but you guys know, like when you just want this to be completely locked in, looking super matte, looking like you are not gonna have any oiliness peek through. This is really what has held it down for me. I can't promise that it's gonna be like completely matte from like 10 a.m. until like midnight, but you will get longevity out of this if you follow these steps correctly. These have worked best for me, and now I wanted to share them with you guys because I feel like it'll be super helpful, especially when you're looking for something that will give you more of a matte vibe. So that pretty much completes today's how-to video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed watching this. I can't wait to do another one in this little series that I have going on. If you guys have recommendations on which how-to you want to see next for face makeup, then please go ahead and let me know down below. I love interacting with you guys. You guys are like the best friends I could ever ask for. And that being said, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Also, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Lets me know to continue doing these types of videos. And that being said, I love you guys so much, and I'll be seeing you guys very, very soon for a brand new video. Bye, guys.